Hi everyone, my name is Corey. I'm joined by Buck right over here. We're two of the reptile keepers at Central Florida Zoo. And you guys just have joined us for a show called Venom. So normally this is about the time when we talk about the difference between poison and venom. So snakes here, like these two snakes that we have over here, are what we call venomous. They have to directly inject that toxin into your bloodstream. So think animals that have fangs, or stingers like scorpions, snakes, wasps, animals like that. Whereas poisonous animals, they have to secrete their toxins through their skin. So if you touch them, lick them, eat them, you get sick that way. Now this venomous snake right here, she is a Florida native. This beautiful little lady over here is Kesha, and she is a timber rattlesnake, also known as a canebrake rattlesnake, depending where you are. This little lady right here, she's about 16 years old. This is about as big as she'll get, and she does have a rattle on the end of her tail, hence the name Rattlesnake. Now these rattles are what we call a warning mechanism. So snakes have a really bad reputation for being aggressive, of wanting to chase people, of wanting to bite them. But the reality is these guys are animals just like any other animal, and they want to be left alone just like any other animal wants to be left alone. So for example, if a big mammal like a human, horse, deer steps too close to these animals, they're going to use that rattle just to warn you away. Kind of make a little noise just like that. And the animal is not trying to bite you, they're just trying to tell you you're too close to them, they're feeling a little bit threatened, and they're going to strike if you continue to get too close to them and harass them. Similar to how our cottonmouth, they also have a similar defense mechanism like that. Now the misconception people have about these snakes is you can tell how old the snake is based off how big that rattle is. And although that's kind of true, it's not the full story. See, every time these snakes shed, they add another segment onto that rattle. And these snakes can shed their skin multiple times a year. 2, 3, 4, sometimes more. So you might have a 16-year-old rattlesnake with a lot of segments on the end of her tail, or you might have a 16-year-old rattlesnake with barely any segments, because those rattles are very, very fragile. They're made out of keratin, the same stuff your hair and fingernails are made of. So just like you guys can break your nails, our rattlesnakes can break their tails off. So, I'm going to pass it off to Buck. He can tell you guys all about our next venomous snake, another Florida native we have here.
Okay, so for most people who live in the state of Florida, or even on the East Coast, you should be fairly familiar with what snake I have right here, but if you're not entirely sure, I don't necessarily blame you. It's a very nondescript brown snake. But this is the infamous water moccasin, also known as the cottonmouth. And it gets that name for a couple of different reasons. The water moccasin part of its name comes from the fact that it likes to hang around bodies of water, which are in abundance here in Florida. Now, the cottonmouth portion of its name comes from its defense mechanism. Now, while it is a close relative of rattlesnakes, it doesn't have a rattle at the end of its tail. Instead, it incorporates its cotton mouth, which is how it gets its name. So what it will do, instead of rattling its tail, if a large predator or a large animal comes by, it will coil up like it's doing right now, and it will open its mouth as wide as it can and display the white interior of its mouth. And generally speaking, if you're afraid of snakes and you see one gaping at you, you're gonna go, okay, I'm gonna leave you alone, and go in the opposite direction. Now, these animals are often confused with another Florida native, that being the non-venomous Florida water snake, and they look almost identical. Now, here in Florida, we actually have 44 different species of native snake. Of those 44, only 6 are venomous though. But because of this, one of the most commonly asked questions we get here at the zoo is, how do you tell the difference between a venomous snake and a non-venomous snake? And the short answer is, you really can't unless you know exactly what type of snake you're looking at. Now, there are some ways that people try to tell the difference, the shape of their head, the shape of their pupils, and whether or not they have heat-sensing pits. But this doesn't work for every single snake. Some snakes look non-venomous and are venomous, and others do not. So the only real way to tell the difference between a venomous snake and a non-venomous snake is to know exactly what type of snake you are looking at. Now, thankfully, like I said, there are only 6 venomous snakes here in Florida. So as long as you know what those 6 venomous snakes look like, you're going to be just fine. In addition, 3 of those venomous snakes are rattlesnakes, and they're very conspicuous. So really, you only need to memorize 3 particular snakes and the rattlesnakes. Now, like we mentioned earlier, this snake does get a bad reputation. A lot of snakes do get a bad reputation for being aggressive, chasing after people, trying to bite them. The cottonmouth in particular is very infamous for this. But its aggression levels are greatly exaggerated. Like we mentioned, no venomous snake wants to have anything to do with people. They know that we are far too big to eat, we are potentially dangerous predators to them, and making venom is a very time-consuming and expensive process. They only really want to use their venom as a last resort, and they only really want to use it on whatever they're going to try and eat. So if you ever see a snake out in the wild, and you're not entirely sure if it's venomous or non-venomous, and odds are if you're close enough to tell what the shape of the pupils are, you're probably too close to begin with. Just stay about 6 to 10 feet away from them. Maybe take a video or some photos if you're that interested, and then walk in the opposite direction. No one's ever gotten bitten by one of these animals by leaving them alone. In fact, one gentleman found a diamondback in his backyard not too long ago and decided to take a shovel to it, and for his trouble, was bitten by the decapitated head. So it's best to just leave well enough alone. You don't need to put yourself in harm's way. If you have any questions, we'll be answering them for a few minutes.
Ava wants to know if they swim.
Yes, in fact, they do swim. Most venomous snakes, in fact, most snakes in general, are very good swimmers. Even though they don't have legs, they can wiggle their bodies around very quickly from side to side, and this allows them to swim. And that's kind of how they get the name water moccasin. They like to spend a lot of time near bodies of water.
All right. What do they eat?
Here at the zoo, we give these guys small rats and mice and things like that, but in the wild, these guys eat a variety of prey. They'll eat other small mammals, especially cottonmouth. They really like eating fish, turtles, even little baby alligators. But here at the zoo, we give them mice and rats about once a week.
Kylie wants to know how they put the venom in you.
So they have venom glands attached to their fangs. When they bite you in with those fangs, they inject the venom into you directly that way. It's really, really sharp fangs that they have. Now the snake can actually kind of control how much venom they're putting into you. There are things called dry bites where the snakes will bite you. They don't actually inject any venom into you.
Awesome. Taryn wants to know how big they get.
This is about average size for both of these animals. Keep in mind that males will get larger than females, at least for these types of snakes. That's because for rattlesnakes in particular, males engage in kind of a wrestling competition where they will compete for mates. They won't bite each other, but they will try and wrap around each other and push each other down. And typically the bigger male will win these sparring matches, but they don't try to bite each other. And in most cases, the venomous snakes are immune to their own venom.
Awesome. Yessie wants to know how many years they live.
So they can live to be over 20 years old. Especially at the zoo, they get really good medical care here. We have a vet on staff that takes really good care of these guys, prescribes them medicine, checks up on them. We collect their poop every so often to take a look at it, see how they're doing. So they can live over 20 years.
Awesome. Last question. What is the population of venomous snakes in Florida?
Great question.
Yeah, it's fairly high, and it all depends on the species in particular. But most venomous snakes in the state of Florida that are native are not threatened by anything, so they are least concerned by most animals. We hope you enjoyed it, and we hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and try and stay safe out there, folks.